Welcome to the Living Out podcast, helping people, churches and society talk about faith and sexuality.
Hello and welcome to the Living Out podcast, the go-to podcast for all things faith and sexuality. I'm Andrew, I'm the Emerging Generations Director here at Living Out, and I'll be hosting today's episode, which is the second in our special Kaleidoscope series, where we are exploring and introducing our new video-based resource for church youth groups, which is called Kaleidoscope. And today our particular focus is on parents. We really believe parents have a key role to play in helping their young people as they explore their questions around sexuality and gender. And we also believe parents have a key role to play in Kaleidoscope, supporting young people who are engaging with and who are working through the series. And so my hope is that today, if you're a parent listening, this episode will be helpful to you and encouraging to you in the important role you have in supporting your young people around these topics, the role you can play if your young person is working through Kaleidoscope. But if you're listening and like me, you're not a parent, I hope today's episode is also going to remind us that we have a role as well in supporting young people. And actually, we've got a really important role in supporting and encouraging parents in the role that they play. And I'm really pleased to be joined by two parents and two ladies who are involved in different ways in Living Out, joined by Jo and Claire. Thank you so much for joining us. Why not just to start off, tell us a bit about who you are and about your families and your kids. Jo, I'll start with you.
Yep. So I am married to Dave. We live in East London. We have got 4 sons, 3 of whom are about to have birthdays. So it's a real test for me to get their ages right. So we've got 16, 17, 19 and 21.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Claire?
Yes, my name is Claire. I am married to Jim and we live in Bristol and we have 3 children, a 16-year-old boy, a 13-and-a-half-year-old boy and a 9-year-old girl.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here. We're thinking particularly about kind of supporting teenagers. So I was wondering, what kind of teenager were you? Claire, I'm going to come to you first on that one. What kind of teenager were you?
Oh, it's hard thinking back, isn't it? I think I was a fairly goody-goody teenager. I was thinking I was a fairly happy teenager. It wasn't a major time of angst. I was quite hardworking, very busy, lots of sort of clubs, involved in church, but it wasn't majorly eventful as a phase in my life.
Nice. Jo, were your teen years eventful?
I would love to say the same as Claire. I'm afraid my teen years were quite eventful, and I really hope my own sons are not listening when I say that I think I was a terrible teenager. I was a real rebel. I was often out drinking with my friends, not letting my parents know where I was, and generally causing them quite a lot of stress, I think.
Oh, well, you've grown up.
Yes, some would say I've grown up.
That's the thing to a teenager, isn't it? We do come through to the other side.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Same question to you, Andrew.
I was a workaholic and a perfectionist. Externally, I was like the golden boy, but I look back now and think how much of it was so unhealthy. There were really unhealthy things driving my being workaholic and perfectionist. And yeah, I'm glad that God has brought me through those. I look back on my childhood and my teen years. I often tell the story of my brother bullied me. We get on well now. But then some very close friends have pointed out I was quite annoying. So, it kind of balances out maybe. I'm sure he would say bad things about me too. But yeah, I think I probably was a slightly annoying teenager. Yeah. Maybe I haven't grown out of that. I'm not going to ask that.
I was going to say, it's weird, even if it's not eventful, it's weird how formative it is, isn't it? And so, like, all my dreams now, I'm back at my secondary school, and they're often bad dreams. I'm often under pressure. I'm working, or I'm racing, or I'm lost. And you think, wow, what was going on in my brain in that sort of 11 to 18-year-old phase that's still working out now?
Yeah, that's a really good point. They are, really important years, and that's a reminder of how important the conversation we're having today is. So we're thinking together about the role that parents play in supporting young people when it comes to working through matters of sexuality and gender. The first thing I'd love to hear from you guys as parents is, what are your observations about the world your kids are growing up in, particularly when it comes to sexuality and gender? And kind of how do you feel about that?
I think one of the things that I have noticed with one of the boys, perhaps more than some of the others, but just the way that the environment at school, the social media, the friends conspire together to create actually quite a scary environment when it comes to talking about these things. So if you're not following the mainstream way of thinking, then there's a real fear of being rejected from your friendship group. And I think it feels scary for the young person, but for me, it also just feels really damaging that, where is the space where you get to talk about what these things are without feeling like people are going to judge you? And so the environment feels really harsh, I would say.
And I suppose adding to that, is it okay to think something different from the majority? So even just on a superficial level, all of my son's friends have exactly the same haircut, wear exactly the same clothes, the same trainers, walk the same. And their worst nightmare is to be different. And actually, if you're raising Christian children, you are going to be raising them to go against the flow, but that is the sort of fundamental thing you must not do as a teenager. So that's pretty challenging if sort of being identical is sort of the main desire you have.
Yeah. Have you found any ways of helping your kids to navigate that, the tension of being a Christian inevitably means you're going to stick out and be different?
I think that is the ongoing conversation, isn't it? And the battle. And I know I don't have a solution yet, but I think that maybe just sowing that seed of this is what your whole life is going to be about, going against the flow, and just beginning to point out others, say in our church, who are going against the flow, but how that's attractive. It's good to be different from the world around you.
And I think where my children have spoken out on things that they care about and they have received a backlash from that, I think it's really important to help them understand what's going on in the heart of the other person that causes them to be sort of saying hurtful, hateful things. We might feel like this is a judgment on who I am and what I'm saying, but often it's more of a reflection on what is going on inside the heart of that person.
Yeah, that's very helpful insight. What do you think about, if we think about sexuality and gender, do you have any thoughts on when's the best age to try as parents to start having these topics with our young people?
Well, I was thinking, we're raised, if we've gone to churches and gone to sort of seminars and things like this, you're told, talk about this from the moment they start walking and talking. And I was thinking, I think a lot of us have sort of signed up to that. And so in the early days when I had small children, we were always doing great God talk, everything was on the agenda. But as they get older, it's funny how you can sort of blink and 3 years have gone by and you haven't had a decent chat about stuff. And so I was thinking, we're probably good at laying the foundations when they're small, but do we keep up with sort of growing their knowledge of sex and sexuality at an age-appropriate way? Because it's no longer just sort of talking about mummies and daddies and marriage. We need to sort of give some of the proper background and what the Bible teaches and the vision. And I just think we can sort of run out of steam and start early and then slow up.
I think too, the answer to that question is just whenever they are talking about it. So, as Claire says, when they're younger, maybe it's you taking the initiative. But as they're older, you have to have those conversations when they want to have them, which is a killer for me because I'm a morning person. I want to be up at 6 o'clock doing my exercises, which means I want to be going to bed at like 9:30 or something. And often that is the time when they want to talk. And so you really do have to take those opportunities. We went to the cinema a few months back and just sparked up a conversation in the car on the way home that then, lasted a few hours. But it was a good one. It was definitely worth having. I just regretted it the next morning.
I just wonder whether with teenagers, if there's a sort of element with parents needing to be a bit more proactive because they might think, I don't really want to talk to mum and dad about this, actually. I think I'll just observe what's going on, talk about it with all my friends at school because it's all the banter and there's lots of sort of chat, but I'm not going to raise it with mum and dad. And so I wonder if there's an element to which I need to sort of make a mental note to keep sort of sowing those seeds, keep watching television shows with my children and sort of going, oh, what do you think about that? Or, just being a little bit more proactive than maybe in the earlier days when they would ask me loads of questions because they were just sort of bubbling away.
We're nicely there moving into kind of what experiences or how you found the experience of talking to your kids about sexuality, about gender in the context of faith, and some good advice there. Any other advice you'd have, any other things from your own experiences, things you think went well, top tips you give, things actually you'd like to have done differently looking back on it?
I think something I would like to do differently, and I try and have in my mind when conversations come up now, is just allowing much more space for them to speak and say what they think. I think if we're not careful, we can feel a bit fearful about discussing this topic. It's such an important thing. We really want to get the point across about, God's good design for sexuality. And that sometimes that fear in me has driven me to speak too much. And especially if we're having a chat around the dinner table, in our family, there's 6 of us, probably half of us are quite loud, and it's a bit of a fight to speak. And so trying to, perhaps follow up with whoever it was that seemed to be bringing that issue to the table one-on-one later would be a good thing to do, and just making sure there's space for them to say what they think, what they're worried about, and not be shockable, and just think, we do have time to talk about these things. They come up quite often, and I don't have to say everything that I want to say on this topic right now in this conversation.
I think that fits nicely with some of the stuff we say in the Parents Guide for Kaleidoscope, where we talk about realising that teenagers are emerging adults. They are learning to develop and own their own beliefs, their own values, and we as adults in their lives actually had to give them the space to really explore and come to those conclusions. And I can imagine as a parent, the temptation is, I'm worried about my child reaching the wrong conclusions or going the wrong direction, so therefore I need to keep just speaking the truth, and speaking truth is important, there's a role for that, but actually leaving space for dialogue, for doubt, actually for questions, all those kind of things is so important, because as teenagers we can't just tell them what to believe, and we shouldn't just tell them what to believe. We should be helping them to work out their own beliefs in good, healthy, hopefully God-honouring ways. I think that's what you're talking about there, Joe. It's realising who teenagers are, what stage of life they're at, helps us to engage well.
And I suppose the unique thing about a family, and a Christian family, is I can truly ask a question that I couldn't ask at school amongst my friends or amongst my teachers. I'm safe to really probe a bit more, and I suppose we'd love that to be true at a church youth group as well. That's why we're creating Kaleidoscope. But I suppose a church, amongst church community and family, are the two truly safe spaces, whereas school is not safe. You actually can't ask most of these questions in school, because the teachers will probably sort of say there is only one view and it's this.
Yeah.
So the way we talk about it is really important. Actually, if the topic does come up, not being kind of shy, bashful, embarrassed, as much as we can, talking confidently from the youngest ages right through to teenage years, confident about these topics, says something of, we're up for the conversation. This is a safe place. Yeah. It's really okay for us to talk about those kind of things.
And also, I was thinking, talking carefully. So things like talking about gender and gender dysphoria and confusion around gender. I think that teenagers can use just really crass language. It can all be very sort of black and white. And as a Christian, finding ways to talk really gently and sensitively and compassionately, I think is important. And maybe I need more help to find the right language, and I need to do more reading so that I've got the right language and understanding. And I can imagine it's easier to sort of just think, I don't want to go there. It's too sensitive a subject, but we've got to go there.
Yeah. And that reminded me, we've got to remember that both parents and other people involved in the lives of young people, they are always listening to us and taking things in. And we notice that the younger kids more we do teenagers, but it is true. And I remember my teenage years, I'd heard things said among family about same-sex attraction and gay people, which raised the question for me of, is this a safe place for me to talk about that, to be honest, actually. And those little comments we make about, it could be a narrative on TV or a news story, they're sending messages, and our young people are hearing those, and that is feeding into their decision whether or not we are safe people to talk to.
Absolutely.
So I think it's always seeking to be, both it's the right thing to be honouring in how we talk, but to be honouring and compassionate in how we talk all the time, because those are the things, probably the indirect things like those, are maybe actually shaping our young person's sense of how safe we are to talk about this more than the direct things, actually. And that's very important to have in mind. We mentioned this a moment ago, church youth groups and the culture we hope's there. Talk to me about how you think churches are handling these topics with young people, what your kind of family's experience of that has been.
I did actually take one of my sons along to an evening on transgender led by Andrew Bunt at our church. And it was an evening like a road show. It was targeted at adults. But I thought, well, he's 15. I'm going to take him along and we'll just see what he picks up. And he only lasted maybe an hour rather than an hour and a half. And then we went home and I didn't badger him loads on the way home. I just wanted him to sort of soak it up and I thought he is not going to get teaching on this in Central Church and he's not going to get teaching on this at school. What a great opportunity. So I did that. But I have to say, generally, our youth group is very small. He's on the fringes of it. He doesn't have many Christian friends in our city. So I think that we're in a smaller setup where our youth group hasn't yet maybe tackled these issues, and I'm really excited that maybe through having a resource like Kaleidoscope they'll have what they need to tackle it, because it is such a big subject and a relevant subject, and I can imagine people feeling I don't want to do it badly so I won't do it at all, but obviously that then leaves a vacuum.
Yeah, I think our church has probably fallen into that last category, Claire. I think just concern. What will happen if we talk about these issues? You know, is it going to bring safeguarding issues that we then need to deal with? And so I think because church life is so busy, you know, it's one of these things that really needs a lot of thought and a lot of care taken. I suppose it's just been one of those things that feels like, you know, this is just a bit too hard. So we haven't done a lot. What we have done, which I think has been really helpful, is we've started teaching through books of the Bible. So, and we have, you know, gone to some books like 1 Corinthians that does talk about relationships. And so we have had some really good teaching from the front. But in terms of tackling this with young people, I don't think we've really addressed it.
And I suspect that experiences or perspective is common. I think as I travel around, talk to church leaders, youth leaders, that's what I see, that people genuinely want to engage young people in these topics. We see the need, we love our young people, we want to show them the goodness of what God says, but most of us just feel really ill-equipped to do that, and it feels too complex, too scary. And that hopefully is where Kaleidoscope comes in. That's one of the big driving motivators for us in producing this series. We can't answer all the questions for churches or do everything for churches, but we can give a resource that hopefully can make it significantly more easy for them to engage with this. And you've both been involved in Kaleidoscope in different ways and are working with us now. Tell me, why are you particularly excited about Kaleidoscope? What especially about it is it that you're excited about?
Andrew, I am so excited about Kaleidoscope. I can't tell you. I think we've been in so many social situations where I've been saying to my friends, "Can I just show the trailer?" And Dave's looking over at me like, "She's showing the trailer again." But I'm so excited because I really feel like there's this big hole where, like you said, you know, youth leaders, church leaders want to address these issues. It is extremely tricky. But here in Kaleidoscope, we've got a sort of package that is packed full of just excellent teaching. So teaching that is full of truth, but also full of compassion. I don't think any young person is going to watch the Kaleidoscope videos and feel like feel judged or feel like they're not understood. I think, you know, there's a real heart of compassion that comes through these videos, but it is accompanied by truth. And then we've also got people's stories. So here are some real live people. This is their experience. This is what they've been through, just talking about the faithfulness of God. So it warms my heart so much. And I am super excited about it.
I think another element that I've been thinking about is what a whirlwind it is when you have teenagers in your house, and how life just is on this sort of crazy conveyor belt, and you never sit down and go, could I give you a Bible overview on sex, or could I explain how what sex is for and what your sexuality is for, and how we're looking to the future marriage. You never have a moment, and if you begin to have that chat, they'll go, thanks mum, what's for dinner, and they just walk off. They only want headlines. And so I'm just so excited that through 6 films, 6 weeks, many children teenagers would get this sort of biblical foundation, not just the sort of marriages for men and women, great walk off, but why? And I feel I read a blog by Ed recently, and he was talking about when he was a teenager, he knew about the biology of sex, but not the theology. And I thought, that's going to be our teenagers too. We're sort of racing through life, and we're not giving them the explanation for what we believe. And so I feel really excited that Kaleidoscope gives that week by week building blocks that we can then riff on and chat about at home and pull apart a bit more.
Brilliant, yeah. Well, it's so lovely to hear how excited you are. We are, so all at Living Out, really excited to see Kaleidoscope going out into the world and hopefully be a great blessing. Jo and Claire, thanks so much for joining me today. Thanks for your wisdom and insight and for spending this time with me. In the final section of this episode, we're going to hear a short interview with another of our Kaleidoscope guests who features in the series. Sean is one of the founders of Living Out. He's same-sex attracted, he's married to Gabby, and he and Gabby feature in episode 3 telling some of their story. He's also a parent and a church leader. So let's listen in on his conversation with Ashley.
Hello, Sean. Lovely to see you.
Hi, Ashley.
So I'll dive right in. So as a parent and as a church leader and as someone who experiences same-sex attraction, what is it that excites you about Kaleidoscope?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm so excited about Kaleidoscope because as one of the founders of Living Out, as you've said, Ashley, like ever since we started Living Out, really, we've been kind of talking and dreaming about a resource like Kaleidoscope. And actually also part of the reason we've been dreaming about that for so long is because so many people have kind of written to us or grabbed us at Living Out events and said to us, what we really need is this. Or in fact, they might even have often said, can you recommend for us, a one-stop kind of resource, preferably on video, which kind of will meet the needs of, kind of youth groups and young people and kind of parents and all of these kinds of different groups. And obviously, I'm not saying there's nothing out there. There's some great resources out there as well, of course. And so we've recommended them. But, none of them have quite been what we would have dreamed up ourselves. And so I think it feels like such a God moment over kind of many years of praying and kind of dreaming of this. And actually also, just to embarrass you and Andrew, Ashley, it feels like a bit of a God moment that God's brought together the right team of people to do this as well. Because when we started Living Out over 10 years ago, I was a bit younger then, but I was still not a young person, a young adult at that stage. I was already kind of married with kids and so on and kind of in my 30s. And, so actually it feels really like God's timing that there's people who will be kind of leading this initiative who are kind of just at the right stage and themselves.
Thank you, Sean. I have to echo that. It's been so exciting just to be able to be a part of this. Partly because I think for both me and Andrew, growing up in church, there wasn't really anything like this. There were some conversations happening, but yeah, there was nothing like this. So I'm excited for teenagers who are growing up now to kind of have access to something we didn't have access to.
Yeah, I'd really echo that from my experience. Presumably when you were a teenager, you had the internet. Before, when I was a teenager, we didn't even have the internet at that point. Obviously, the internet is a mixed bag, very mixed bag. But I remember for me when I was just becoming aware of my sexuality, I think the only thing I could find about it was obviously it was all in books at that point. And I remember looking up in the back of a John Stott book. I found in the index, I found homosexuality in the index, and I went and looked up what did he say about that. That was literally the only thing that I found directly. There was some good teaching on sex and on relationships, so I'm very grateful that I had that teaching and input, and I was in environments where people were when I shared about my sexuality, people thankfully responded very wisely and supportively and with lots of acceptance, as well as pointing me to what scripture says. So that was a really good kind of, I'm so grateful to God I had that. But actually, in terms of, there was that season of, but I'm trying to work this out on my own, really, up to that point with John Stott's help,
Yeah. So how much of a difference do you think that would have made to you as a teenager if you'd had something like this, if those kind of more specific conversations were happening? Do you think that would have been significant for you?
I think because I think part of what Kaleidoscope I see it will do is it won't be the last word on the subject by any means, but it will resource people and give people the confidence to initiate those conversations. So whether it's parents watching stuff with their kids, or even just saying to their kids, have a look at this and tell me what you think, depending on the age of the young person, or in a youth group, because I think very often people feel they're so scared of saying the wrong thing, and they know the damage that saying the wrong thing can do. Now that's healthy in a way, because I'd far rather that someone was cautious of saying the wrong thing, that they feel overconfident, and that they, by doing that, they just think, oh, I know exactly what to say, and then that can actually be damaging for a young person. So it's good to have that caution, but the obviously the best option is not to say the wrong thing or say nothing, but to say the right thing. And I think Kaleidoscope has therefore kind of that role of being a conversation starter, but also it then kind of like models what we in Living Out would think is a kind of good practice in terms of how do you actually have, on the one hand, this sort of, rooted in scripture, trying to be really faithful to what God says and the way God has made us, and yet, very much compassionately, pastorally engaged with young people and their questions today.
Amazing. Is there anything kind of with your parent hat on, if you have different hats for different things, is there anything you'd say to maybe some parents who are listening to this who aren't sure about Kaleidoscope or aren't sure about talking more generally with their children about this? Maybe they want to but don't know how to begin, or maybe they're not sure that even it's a conversation that they should be having with their children and their teenagers. What would you say to the parents who are listening?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is I'm no expert about that. And I think what is really interesting to me in my own journey is that even as somebody who's same-sex attracted and speaks in public and in kind of church settings a lot about sexuality and the Bible, when it comes to your own children, like initiating positive, healthy conversations, I actually face the same kind of challenges and sense of embarrassment and sense of I don't want to kind of kind of pressure my kids to have a conversation that they're not ready for or they don't want, because my kids have got 3 teenagers and they're just as teenagery as any other teenagers. They don't really always want to have conversations with their parents about big topics any more than anyone else's children do. So I very much recognise it's always difficult, and therefore I'm the kind of like all the more kind of glad to see the development of resources to facilitate that. And then I guess, but the other thing I'd say is therefore, because it's always difficult and is never going to be something that both parents and young people, both sides kind of feel elements of uncomfortable. I think that just shows to me, I suspect it is always going to be that way, and therefore all the more reason for us to kind of bite that bullet, to take that leap and say, hey, we do need to talk about this though, not in a way, of course, that is intrusive or, trying to get young people to open up and share more than they're ready to. Obviously, we need to let them kind of only, share things that they are ready to share and talk about. So obviously there's got to be respect for their boundaries within that, but at least to give them the opportunity to do so, and to create an environment where that is possible in a healthy way.
Amazing. Sean, thank you so much. It's been so good to chat to you. Thanks, guys, for listening to this episode. We hope that you've really enjoyed it and benefited from it. Join us again next time for another Kaleidoscope special on the podcast. And of course, do head to livingout.org and find Kaleidoscope on there for yourself. Enjoy looking through that, and we'll see you next time.